Good evening, everyone, and welcome for our second talk. So for this talk, I'm delighted to introduce Andrew Sabin. He's going to show us some of his work, which he's made over a 40-year period, and in particular discuss how materials and processes shape his work. Andrew is a British experimental sculptor who makes work ranging from object-based studio work to large installations and public landscape projects. His Coldstones Cut in the Yorkshire Dales is one of the most visited landscape sculptures in Britain, and his Sea of the Sun installation was featured in the inaugural exhibition of contemporary sculpture at the Henry Moore Institute in Leeds. Andrew studied sculpture at Chelsea School of Art in the early 1980s, where sculptors such as Richard Deacon, Sheila Clewitt, Helen Chadwick, and I believe Anthony Gormley taught. And he later became a senior lecturer there too. In addition to exhibiting here, he's also currently exhibiting in These Mad Hybrids at the RWA in Bristol. And you can see his permanent public work in many places, including sculpture, and in London on the site of the original Chelsea School of Art building, where his memorial work, painting and sculpture, is permanently located. He lives and works in West Sussex, running the Matt Black Barn educational programme dedicated to the study of sculpture, and is based at their studios in West Sussex with his partner, Laura Ford. He says, "I believe it is a sculptor's job to test materials. It doesn't come without obstacles, but I like a good sculptural struggle." Over to you now, Andrew.
Hi, thanks, Sarah. That was me who became the senior lecturer, Anthony Gormley.
Oh, sorry.
Anyway, so before we begin with the slides, I'm going to say a few very, very basic things, some of which Sarah's already said, about sculpture and matter. And the first thing I'm going to say is that we're all made of matter. And that any thoughts we have or actions we take have a material basis. In fact, everything we experience emanates from matter. My feeling is that we're so good at negotiating this world of matter that we kind of forget that we're doing it. But the reality is that all our interactions with what surrounds us our interactions with matter, and we're making a continuous and ongoing and very highly detailed analysis of the disposition of matter everywhere we step. So it seems to me, as Sarah said, that the sculptor's job is to play with matter, to see what it can do, and to try and become sensitive and thoughtful about how we respond to the disposition of matter. I'm very liberal, probably as liberal as you can get, about the materials that can be played with. They're all available, whether in their rawest state or kind of covered with layers of cultural refinement. They're all there to be played with in any way that appeals to the person who's playing them. So the sculptor's sort of game is to be matter, playing with matter, and checking in to see how you're feeling about it, what kinds of thoughts are provoked by that playing. Obviously, I'm going to show you 40 slides. Quite a few of them, certainly the beginning ones, actually come out from my art school work. And for me, that's the art school environment, is the environment where you kind of accelerate that game of play with materials. And then museums and galleries are where we test those propositions. I've been doing it for 40 years. It's great to play, but there's also making a living. And therein lies one of the hugest tensions in being a sculptor, because if you're a liberal kind of follow your nose kind of sculptor, it's very difficult to make a living, because the people who might buy the work want to have it in their homes. So one is constantly struggling with a kind of compromise there. So I'm going to show you 40 or so slides, starting at art school, as I said. I went there in 1979. So as we go, I'm very happy for you to chip in and ask questions. I'm only going to show one picture of each work, and I'll try and say as much as I can about the materials and what I was thinking about at the time. But I've also got to get through them. So, but it's easier if you have a question to ask it in front of the image. So hopefully, here we go. Oh dear, nothing happened. Here we go. So this first work I made in my second year. It's like a game. It's a game that expresses itself through slices through railway line. So these are sections through a railway line. The atmosphere of the railway line for me was about time. It's a sort of simple emblem of the transit from A to B to C and so on. So there's a little dancing play of these sections through a railway line, and then there's a game of chance about where the next section is welded on. So I took it in turns between me leading the line in a direction, and then there's a sort of setup of dice and pieces in the wooden frame that creates a play between my desire and the force of chance in making that line. So that's that work. And this very bad photo is actually a very large ball of asphalt, which I think I was intrigued by sort of schoolboy memories of images of asphalt lakes, sort of bubbling tar coming out of the ground and fossilized trees. So you know, again, it's just getting the material, playing with it. It's a ball. It's held up by these props that sort of, with the gravity of the ball pulling it down and pulling the props in. Rather ridiculously, it's also a fountain. So there, in its pomp, there were 4 jets of water coming out, being caught by these sort of opposing ideas at the top. Geometry. I think there's a sort of fur box. There's a lens and a kind of gland type thing. So yeah, this is I mean these 3 are all from BA. So but you can see the enthusiasm to experiment. This is I think I called it cargo canoe, and again it's a contemplation of where one is in time. Asphalt again in the mooring points, canvas tents, fresh fruit. This is a work called Am I Not Me? It's later, a few years later, and its sort of key components are some plastic roll top desk material, which I sliced up and made into rolled up into these circular elements at the top, and then combined them by taking the biggest sheet I could of aluminium and slicing it into a spiral strip and rolling them up, gathering them up into this lump with a tail and putting it in. It's actually quite a figurative container full of space. Yeah, it's a sort of spacious spatial examination of, I suppose, a mental apparatus. This is called Pen Ponds in Winter. Pete found PVC tubes cut at both ends and then heated up and rolled back to make these sort of, I don't know, court jester type tubes. Found plastic sort of, I don't know what the material would be used for, but with a marble print on it, and then the grid made by using solvent to get the marble colouring off, and surrounded by this surround of ceramic tiles. Thinking about actually a memory of a frozen lake in Richmond Park, which is where Pen Ponds is. Lots to say about that, but we won't get through it if I talk too long about it. This is called Spring. It has a printed plastic sheet with the design of pebbles on it, of stones, flints, and then also incorporated in the work are flints themselves. Between the flints, there's polythene that's been cut into strips and glued down to make a kind of rough to fill the space between the stones. And there's a sort of hot red part at the bottom, and these kind of buds coming up through it. It's a sort of synthetic plastic animal feeling thing. Yeah, so entirely, my studio is now and was then full of materials that I've just been drawn towards and seen what I can do with them. And I spent a fair old amount of time playing with that polythene and making this sort of synthetic fur, which yeah. This is called The Great Divide. It's actually a cast of a tree, and it's sort of the colours of chlorophyll and photosynthesis in a branch, and then budding out through it are these ceramic buds, which have a pearlescent glaze on them, so that when you look at the white, it's actually got all the colours in it. I suppose thinking about fecundity and sort of bursting life. These are two works. I think to the left is night, to the right is day, and in the middle is last birthday. I would say they were made around 1988, something like that. Hello, Marie-Therese. You've got your hand up.
Yep. I just want to know how big. The last sculpture, the tree one.
The tree one is probably about 5 foot high, maybe a bit more. The grey one in this slide is about 10 foot high, maybe more. 10 feet high. Yeah.
Thanks.
So yes, 1988. The year after what people of my generation know as the Great Storm, where I don't know 20% of our trees were blown down So there was endless amount of timber available to pick up. So the one on the left is actually yew tree, and the one on the right, I think, is elm. Not that there's any such thing as elm anymore. So again, they're coated. Each branch is coated in a thick layer of gloopy polyester. So inside it is nature, and overlaid are these plasticky coatings. This one is called Please Mother, I Can't Help It. Hello, Sarah.
Hello, yeah, just a quick question following Marie-Therese's. At this time, do you work on pieces, do you work on several pieces at once within when you're experimenting with the materials, or would you focus just on one at a time?
I think at that time I did, but not so very many. Now I work on 15 or 20 pieces simultaneously, and enjoy that. But I think I don't know. Maybe I was clearer about the outcomes in those days. I got a more definite sense of where each work was heading, whereas now I make a part and then I just let it lie around and work itself on me, and I don't really have the strongest sense. Often I do sometimes of where the work will end up.
So does that mean sometimes you might start something, put it to one side, and then rediscover it, as it were, and bring it back in, or does it then start to inform how you might make an approach on another piece?
I think that's right. I think it's a good way of working. I think forgetting is a helpful thing, and being too adherent to one's first sort of preconception is often not the healthiest thing. I remember going to a lecture by Ken Kiff, and he said, I can't remember the number, but it was an impressively large number, that he worked on 200 canvases at any one time. And each morning he'd sort of flip, they're all leaning up against the wall. He'd flick through like some massive folder and pick out one that he fancied the look of, couldn't remember what on earth he was thinking about, do a little bit more, put it back in the stack. And then occasionally a painting would say, I'm finished. And that would be a done work. And that rather appealed to me. I'm probably not quite as fluid as Ken Kiff claimed he was, but anyway, does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, no, interesting, thanks.
So this is either called Landscape with Teeth or Please Mother, I Can't Help It. And it's a landscape. It's a sort of cellular tongue-like taste buddy kind of landscape, punctured by these rather, what I suppose I might be reading Moby Dick at the time, or something of that order. You know, the horror of the white, and I always feel it's an embarrassed kind of work. It was cast upside down. We have to keep talking about materials. Cast upside down in salt. So each terrace, as I think of them, is cast upside down on a bed of salt, which then gives it a sort of texture, because you can wash the salt away. So I would have poured, I think, polyester resin into the enclosure to make each terrace, and then wash the salt out to leave a sort of pumicey kind of texture. And we'll come to salt later when we get to margarine. So this is called Niagara, made in 89, something like that. Again, this sort of definitely. So for Marie-Therese, this is about 8 foot high. It's a big thing. One's head sort of comes up to just above the yellow elements. And it's, yeah, I suppose it's just, for me, bursting with that sort of chlorophyll sun abundance, sort of, yeah. But at the same time, a dance with the synthetic, as opposed to the I suppose the natural. It's so I had some see-through green plastic shower curtain, I think, and I sewed it into a tube and filled it with 2-part polyurethane foam, and then kind of wrestled with it to get it to interlock. It's a crazy piece of making, but it actually comes apart. It's like those puzzles that you pull out middle elements and gradually it comes to pieces, and you have to get it back in the right order. But looking at it, I can see what fun it was, and also what a struggle it would have been to make. This is a continuation of that same way of making plastic coated, stretchy car seat kind of fabric, but bound into it ceramic discs, again pearlescent, but black this time, and in a container, a bit like an open structured fruit bar. This is a prototype for this show, which was at Chisenhale. It's the first of 3 installations I made. Basically, I think there were 10 or so of these objects, everyday things, kind of basic tree structures, sort of wall structures, a car, a fist, things whose names we might know, but in this sort of expanded, camouflagey, sort of pressing out from inside kind of making methodology. So I think I probably made a core with an armature in fiberglass, and then glued on a sheet of this material with the ceramic disc taped in, and then filled the foam behind. I think I was thinking about Solaris. What is that? Stanislav Lem, I think. Tarkovsky made a film of it. This idea of thought stuff, what one having little access to the actualities out there, and trying to make manifest something that felt like the thought of the thing as opposed to the thing itself. This is a prototype for the next installation I made. I should probably say I talked about tension with selling. Up until the point I was making installations, I suppose I was making objects and I was showing them in a Cork Street gallery, and it was all going fine. But I kind of felt a bit awkward about it and started to make very large installations, the first of which was the one at Chisenhale. This is an experiment in layering up information in space. So it's a kind of grid again of cuboid forms infilled with mesh with patterns on it, so that as you look through, it layers up, and what you see as your eye passes through the work becomes more and more complex. This is a pretty image, but it's very difficult to see what it actually is. It's one small part of a very large, I think it's 20 meters by 10 meters and 2.5 meters high, sort of immersive installation. And it's made of those chain link curtains. So I think here, as I was thinking, it's 90, what is it? It's 1990, I think. And we're just getting PCs and thinking about information and simple units of information, pixels. So I'm, again, like that prototype, I'm filling space with, I mean, there are millions of these units of single color chain curtain. So there are images, some landscapes. This is my mother, actually. And there are quite a lot of sort of generic family images from my family in amongst an awful lot of kind of psychedelic patterns. This is a sort of spin-off work, again, a see-through thing, simple mesh, some of which is painted, some of which is punctuated by connection points. I think I call this sea wall. It's basically a white donut shape in space. This is the third installation I made, and this was up in the Henry Moore studios in Halifax. A very luxurious kind of sculpture making invitation to really make what you want. And by this time, I think my studio practice was sort of thinning out. I didn't have a very nice studio. I was very keen to make this final part of this three element series of installations, and it's really built around the cattle grid, which I kind of love the notion of the cattle grid, where some animals can pass and some animals can't. And thinking about the space of the cattle grid, neither being on one side nor the other. So I filled this large volume with an enormous cattle grid and invited people to walk out over it and under it. So it's all just one material, which is steel. Yeah. So by the end of this installation, I really had stopped my studio practice, and my next move was to enter the public realm, which I mean, really, I think I was romantic about it. I thought that the kind of sculptural principles that I developed were just as applicable in the public realm. I started to apply to do projects out there. This is a work that was made in the town centre at Whitstable, when they were redeveloping the town centre. So this is the product of the demolition of the town centre. So these were buildings that were on site, kind of compacted and compressed. So the material of the building still emanating some of the feeling of those buildings, but obviously in the absence of the spaces in between, losing their functionality. There's a red patch towards the end of it, which is one of the several places where people threw buckets of paint over the work in protest at it. The public realm, yeah, I did a lot of work in it, and it's extraordinarily complex. And certainly this project in Whitstable Town Centre was politically very difficult. This is a work which never really got realised, should have been realised. We're probably in 97, something like that. It's called the Sabin project. Again, we were kind of at the beginning of the internet at this time. The idea was to be thinking in a very neutral way about synthetic plastics that transit through the oceans. The principle was that disposal was a mistake, and that actually we want to be looking at this stuff and accumulating and communicating. So the idea was that each beach would have something we called a Sabin. I was working with a chap called Stefan Shanklin at the time, so this is I think the first Sabin, and on a beach in Selsey in West Sussex, and the idea was that every beach should have one of these things, and that the material should simply accumulate, and one could share information between the different sites and the different ownerships of the sea bins. It was a project. I think I travelled around the country and had dialogue with hundreds of coastal local authorities, very keen to do it mostly, but we couldn't raise the money really, and we just ran out of energy and didn't do it. But again, in a different form, it's an interest and a play and a way of thinking about materials in the world. Yeah, I like the non-judgmental aspect of it. Obviously, one doesn't like too many of these materials in the environment, but we tried not to go there. This is a bottle recycling unit in Ballymena. Again, thinking about disposal and how through our disposal systems we avoid the implications of the sheer volume of matter that we are consuming, transforming, moving through our systems. So I think we're in 98, 99, something like that. And in this moving around the public realm, it's not like studio practice. There are moments of high excitement, but without the thing, you have to kind of make your case. Some nice things came out of it. This was a very nice bridge for a while before it got smashed up. And this was the last public artwork I made. Well, actually, I made the one at Chelsea after this, but the last kind of major public realm intervention. It's called the Coldstones Cut. That's a limestone quarry in front of it. It's an enormous it's a viewing platform as well as a kind of platform to view into the work itself. The line down the middle is actually a 100-meter long street with tarmac, which has been made in the works from the limestone quarry. The stone is all out of the limestone quarry. And it has various sub-works in it. I think it's quite a good work, actually, and well worth a visit. It's up in the Yorkshire Dales. Anyway, by this time, this is 2010, I think I was completely losing contact with any idea of studio practice, and rather exhausted by the negotiations involved in the public realm. So I tried to get back into the studio. And it's actually very difficult once you've stopped your studio practice to pick it up again. I'm going back in time now, and just to some much earlier work. And I think I mentioned that the landscape with teeth was cast upside down in salt. I did quite a lot of things with salt. This is a carved cattle lick. And this is salt mixed with wax and cast into a shape. One of the exciting things about salt is that it's very responsive to the atmosphere. So on humid days, this work would kind of sweat and perspire, and on dry days, all of that would evaporate, leaving these crystal forms in the middle. And I kind of like the life of it, but and that's another one with salt involved. Completely impractical. Every tool you use in it rusts, and really, although it has some enjoyable elements, it's kind of a disaster for one studio and anybody else working around it. But I think at a certain point in trying to get back into the studio, I was contemplating my sort of historical approach to materials. And I mean, I did a lot of things, but this work here was kind of thinking about where I got that salt from and the kinds of material around it. And this work, so I went to a kind of industrial foods wholesaler. So the quality of salt I liked was that it was soluble in water, that it was granular, and I could make a texture with it. And I thought that maybe I could do that with sugar, and I wouldn't get all that rusting. So this work here was cast in 2 pourings, both upside down, buried in soft brown sugar, with the steel element in between. I kind of, yes, I bought a fair amount of soft brown sugar, which was great stuff. It's a bit like casting sand. If you sort of squeeze it, it holds its form with the sort of molasses content. It takes texture very nicely. These lines down it. So you basically there would have been 2 negative cone shapes with the texture put in with a metal bar that I put the texture in, and then the sort of crater marks are actually made of lumps of icing sugar, and then it's all washed away. And at the same wholesaler, I thought, well, if icing sugar is good and soft brown is good, maybe they've got some other good stuff. And I bought some boxes of margarine, and I think this is the first work I made using margarine. So that the 2 cones at the bottom, it's cast in jesmonite, actually, solid jesmonite with pigment. The 2 cones at the bottom are made in soft brown sugar, and then I probably made this in 2016 or 17 or something like that, 16. But the element at the top, it definitely looks to me like it was made in margarine. So this is sort of transition, because what I haven't told you is that these days I work almost exclusively with margarine, which is a material which kind of ticks so many boxes for me, and which I've been working with it for a very long time, and I can't see myself stopping. I just find it so exciting. So this is 2 different types of margarine. I'm showing you this because the next slide. So with margarine, I'm always working backwards. I never make anything actually out of margarine. So when I put the slides together, I was thinking about how in the latter installations and all those mesh works, I was kind of thinning out space, and there was an awful lot of void. And here I'm making all the voids in the work by putting margarine where there will be nothing. So that arrangement there, it's not actually the mold to make the orange element, but that it's similar. That arrangement of pieces of margarine creates the possibility to make that orange element there. The piece in front of it is made in a different way with margarine, again, modeling the hollow and pouring in fact, polyurethane and pouring it into, and having filled the mold with various types of stone, so that polyurethane acts as cement within a sort of concrete matrix. So it's plastic concrete where the aggregate is in there and the cement has been replaced by liquid polyurethane, and it's sitting on a concrete shelf. So it doesn't look much, but so this is the beginning of a mold. You can probably see I put a steel armature in. You could probably see the pink element is there already. So I'm kind of embedding one element into a new mold, and then it becomes that thing. So the mold you're looking at there is the mold that made these bottom elements that hold up this shape. The shape itself was simply scraped into a smear of margarine on the ground, and that margarine smear was punctuated by what I call holes, but are actually rods of margarine. And then the scrape, well, as you might sort of cast a tire mark in the mud, it was filled with this polyurethane material with stone poured in it. So the sort of white and black bits are various types of stone. This is another mold being made. It's a similar process. Maybe everybody's seen the show at the Elysium. The plinth for the stainless steel work from time to time was made with this method. So it's just a series of margarine, almost coil pots with a texture put on it, bound together. And I'm kind of making obviously it's all in negatives, so I'm making the connections between the elements. So you can sort of see, the sort of ridges is where I'm starting to pull these things together into one unit, if that makes any sense. And that's the continuation of it. So it's a kind of live and active mold. I start at the bottom. As I fill, I add on my mold, and I can take these arms anywhere I want, change their size. I can look at what I'm making as I reveal it at the bottom and respond to it as I go up. It's a kind of live mold making. Very different from making a positive, casting it, and then receiving out of your mold the cast of the object. And always making backwards. That's I mean, what I find is a great pleasure and a freedom to not make in positive, but make in negative. Somehow it's faster and the decision making is easier. So just to sort of go back a little, I've been using margarine solidly since 2016, that sort of time, for a long time. And I'm now going to show you some of the things I've made, all with exactly the same process of making negatives and filling them using armatures inside the mold, and filling them with in this instance polyurethane, And I think there are little infills because you've got access to the sides of your mold, and you can dig things into it. You can put in any material, and that all gets taken up by what you're casting in. So there's a lot of texture I've added into the sides of the mold, which are then picked up by what I poured it into. This is the original of the From Time to Time work that's in the show at the Elysium. Much bigger. I think it's about 8 meters from end to end, 3 or so meters high. It's got a steel armature, and it was made by spreading margarine on polythene strips and then wrapping it round to form a bit like an ice cream cone around the armature, and then filling it with different tones of polyurethane. And then the one that at the Elysium is scanned. I was actually cast in stainless steel in China, rather ridiculously, and sent back. This is called the chicken and the yolk. All cast in various ways in margarine molds. So the sort of gizzard hanging down, orange shape, is a bit like a samosa, where there was I think there was a steel armature sticking out, and a samosa or saddlebags. So a margarine sheet with texture put on it, dropped over the bar of the armature, and then pinched together around it to form a samosa casing, and then filled with foam. Yeah, just so many different ways of using it. So this is in concrete. It's called the Puff of the Pastry. It's a series of tabletops with events above and below each tabletop. Lots of texture, lots of action, pigmented concrete with a steel armature. This is on a spiral line, so there's a steel armature. This is sort of quintessential samosa work. So I don't know if you can see it, but there are metal studs. Oh, Sarah, your hand is up. Can't hear you.
Sorry, yeah. Well, I might be going off track a bit, but can you tell us something about colour in your work? Because, you know, after you stopped working in the public realm, the work strikes me as it's become much more colourful, and it's become the colours integral to the material. And I just wondered if you could just tell us a bit about that.
Well, yeah. As in my earlier days, I used a lot of colours, no doubt about it. I don't really like applying it to the surface. I do, but you know, like we looked at those tree works with, you know, thick polyester coatings on it. So I do that, and then I really emphasise that it's a coating. Here, the color, I put it into the material in its liquid state. In this instance, I pour them in together. It's a race to get the materials in because it goes off very quickly, and then I let it fight its, you know, the different colors fight together to form. I suppose it's a bit like watching if you look down from a bridge and watch the swirling patterns of water. It's the same thing when I pour the different colours into the mould. They're kind of working around each other in relation to the obstacles that I put in. I was going to say so there's an armature that's in a spiral, and then there are some steel studs which hold the two sides of the samosa or saddlebag apart, and give me a void that I can then fill. More about colour. Well, it's just so exciting, isn't it? So it changes the atmosphere of everything. I think I had a period making all black works, about 3 years of it. And I look at them, they're good works, but I feel I might have been rather depressed at the time.
Another question I did want to ask you as well is, it struck me that your decision to go to leave the public work behind, was that because you needed? Was it stifling you in a way? Was it stopping your ability to experiment and create and be more, kind of experimental and explore materials in quite a free way? Because it does seem to me that once you left the public works behind, you were you've been trying and sort of kind of playing around with the materials more than designing, and I sort of feel that perhaps that was a conscious decision. Am I right?
It's the process of the public realm, that you're trying to make things that are very, a strange mixture of. You might have your arts officer, but you've got all kinds of people who haven't done very much thinking about what sculpture is and how to think about it. So you're trying to make presentations that will cover different ways of understanding, and that process takes a long time. The decision making takes a long time. It's actually very boring. Theoretically, it's the most exciting domain on earth, but it's boring, and there's a lot of tension to it, and it's just very difficult. I think I got worn out by it.
Do you think sometimes also you end up compromising in your, or that you might design something or create an idea for something, and then when it comes to realizing it, you've kind of left that idea behind, and you can't push it in the way that you might want to, in the way that you can work with your studio work. So if it goes in a different direction, you can follow that. But in a public work, you can't, can you?
It's harder. I think it's possible, and I think I did it on a few occasions. On other occasions, I did feel, I felt disappointed actually. Locked into delivering something that I didn't have the hugest amount of faith in, and which already had been compromised by, all the regulations and completely understandable things. But I suppose you're very lucky. I had a few very fortunate, like the Chelsea one, like the Coldstones Cut, commissions where really you can show your stuff. There are other commissions where they've already got a whole set of needs and requirements, and you've got to somehow fulfill them, or not take the gig. Sometimes I did take the gig, and I probably shouldn't have. Anyway, yeah. it was tough actually. It was a tough period in my life to find my studio practice again, having really not had it for 10 or 15 years. But I think I have actually. Shall I just looked at my phone and I've gone on for quite a long time. Uh, is there more? Something's happened to my oh, there it is. Yeah, okay. So yeah, I was just going to end with two pictures from the Elysium show, ending on that one. So there we are. That's my talk. But I'm very happy if anyone's got some questions for me to answer.
Has anybody got any questions, or does anybody want to put anything
Hello,
in?
Marie-Therese.
I do.
Oh, good. I can't see everybody's face.
Yeah. I just wanted to know about, you talked about making and how you can sort of follow the process, and with the margarine you can alter things. So then I was sort of wondering about, do you plan? I mean, do you draw your ideas, or do you just start making them? And what role is it that the material is more important, or comes first, what the material does, and then you sort of follow that, and then, you know, how do you? Yeah.
I don't do very much drawing. I never have, except indeed in all that public realm stuff, where there was a lot of architectural kind of drawing and computer stuff. So I don't do much drawing. Yeah, I mean, I do really follow. I might start out in a direction that I know and to achieve a certain type of form, but very quickly, yeah, I see I can do something else, something more than I had thought of, and I frankly, I just let myself follow it. I'm very happy to do so. I mean, I feel, yeah, I feel I've done my thinking about what sculpture's about, how it operates in space, and it's all there in me. And I am really trusting that that I'm at the point where I'm simply expressing all of that thinking and doing through sculpture making, yeah. And however long I have, that's what I should follow. Yeah, I've got so many different sculptures I want to make. It's yeah.
Well, it's really interesting, because I think in a way your work has so much freedom in it, and that word playfulness comes back. And I think that's because you're responding to the material and not a plan, which is interesting, because maybe that's what was so constraining, because you have to have plan when you make public sculpture.
And I think one of the things I really like about the way that you use the materials is you've got this range of materials that you use, but you do use them in a very particular way, don't you? And I think, as Marie-Therese says, because you pull them all together and then you play around with them, you use them to say something quite particular, and whether it's an emotion or creating a sculptural presence, I think the way that you either direct, the margarine, or you use the mounds of, when you're using the mounds of sugar and things, you do put forward that you have got a large vocabulary, haven't you, within those forms?
I hope so.
Now, I think you have within those different marks. You're making marks in the margarine, with your hands, and I love the fact that you can see that it's been manipulated with your hands. You might have used your finger to make a hole in it, or scraped something off or made that, like you've made the sort of the piece that we're looking at the screen now. You made the stainless steel piece originally by sort of, wrapping around the margarine like an ice cream cone. And I love that because it gives fluidity, but also I think an organic quality to the work as well. But there's lots of different sort of expressions that you get within that.
Well, I hope it's complicated and rewarding to look at, and yes, that every bit is particularly different to every other bit.
Well, I think so. And some of the children today, they were really intrigued by all that. We had to stop them touching it, but they wanted to kind of. They would say, "How was that made? Was that made by wrapping wire around?" And that one on the wall, that looks like a giant bacteria, and how does that come about? And they love that sense of energy within the work.
Yeah.
And actually, when I show you some of their drawings, especially with the sap rising one, the way they actually created vortexes with their oil pastels to kind of get that energy through. And I think that's what I've really enjoyed about seeing your work in the flesh as well, because it's very much with the encounter of seeing the work that you get those emotional responses to the way that the material's literally been transformed and handled.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I talk about sort of abandoning the plan and playing and mucking around. At the same time, I might be deluding myself, but my delusion, if it is that, is that I'm actually tackling the fundamental questions of where we are, what we are, looking at the fundamental processes of gravity, the way matter behaves. These kinds of questions are always in my mind as I'm mucking around. And and in a way, I think that if the children are responding to it, it's because there are those kinds of thoughts that everybody has from a very early age, those kinds of questions swirling around in those vortexes, if you know what I mean, Sarah.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, definitely. And they did respond to that. And it's quite interesting as well. Today I was looking at the radius and the ulna, where you've got the heaviness of the roughly cut steel kind of dangling over those concrete mounds, and you really do feel the weight of that. And it was interesting with the children's drawings of those as well, because in their marks they got that feeling of the weight of the material. So it's definitely been communicated. So it was really, really enjoyable to witness that, as you say, with perhaps people that don't have those kind of barriers that we might have with art. They just get straight in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's great.
Good.
Has anybody got any comments? Or I can't see everybody, so if anybody does want to ask. Oh, Penny, I can see Penny's got a question. You are muted at the moment.
Yeah, I loved that. Thanks very much. And what a journey through all your work, and congratulations on leaving all those public opportunities behind. It's just fantastic to see the return to all that energy and color and I don't know, exploration. So it's a stupid question. If there is, I think it is. It feels a bit stupid, but I just wonder where they all are now. Where all your studio works are. Have they survived the years, and are they in one place? I've just got this. I imagine that if they do, you could walk into like maybe a warehouse or something, and they're all there in all through the years, all sort of.
You're absolutely right. The Sea of Sun installation, that big chain installation, is actually up in our storage space, and very much alive and kicking. We've got a very big storage space, and we've actually just built new studios and a home next to that storage space in West Sussex. So a lot of it does exist. Some of the some of the things that I've shown you today at various times I had to get rid of, but I have still got a lot of it.
Are they all out, or are they packed away?
Some I have a very so we've got this big industrial barn, sort of agricultural industrial barn with very high shelves on it. So there's a lot of them are stacked on those shelves. Some of them in boxes, but there's a lot that's visible. Yeah, I don't know where you are, Penny, but we're in West Sussex, and we sometimes have open days. Come and have a look.
Thank you. From the heart of Wales to West Sussex. One day I might make it, but I can imagine it's a really exciting space.
Yeah, it is nice.
Has anybody else got any more questions?
Hi, Andrew. I just wanted to ask about, I haven't seen the work in person, but from the images that you've shown, there seems to be a kind of almost a precariousness to some of the sculptures, that they're very intricately balanced. And I wondered if that was something about that kind of dialogue you're having with matter and how matter performs and its balance within our kind of world. Is that something that's part of the way that you make and the way that you think?
I think it's one of the fundamental elements of sculpture is how things fight or take their place in the world, whether they're standing on tiptoe. We see it all the time. If a chair is on its four legs, that's one thing. If a chair's lying with its four legs sort of sticking out in the air, that's another. How things are. A car with its rubber sort of discs resting on some lines, turning on the road. I mean, how things are against the ground tells you what kind of a thing it is, what kind of mood it's in. And again, I think I said it. We're making these evaluations all the time. We're so good at it, we forget we're doing it. But you lift your toe up. If we're thinking figuratively, you lift your toe up. That's you can change the whole atmosphere of the thing by putting it down. It's absolutely fundamental, that relationship with the ground and how you understand an entity. Yeah, in anything, in architecture, in absolutely everything, trees, Leaning Tower of Pisa, you name it, that relationship with the ground tells you an awful lot about it. Do I remember the beginning of your question? Precariousness. The one we're looking at the moment, I think, has got 13 legs, and some of them are on the ground, and some of them seem to be in transit. Yeah, I'm playing with that sort of thing all the time.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at listening to the conversation you had with Sarah about the shift from the public realm back into the studio, because one of the things that seemed really explicit from the imagery that you've shown is that shift from the very static nature of the public realm work to this work, which has that sense that it's about to move, that there's gesture and movement and flow in these kind of later works.
Yeah. Well, obviously they're not going anywhere. But they're showing their energy, I guess, and the vigor in their intent, as it were.
You also said one really wonderful thing earlier on, the thought of the thing rather than the thing itself is what you were kind of considering in some of those works, which I thought was really beautiful.
Well, thank you. Well, you know, it may be beautiful, but it's also the human condition that our connection with the thing itself is only through that thinking apparatus, which is a complex configuration of matter, and I suppose in that work and in others, I've tried to make it feel more like a thought. I mean, I've talked about habit a fair amount and being so good at, I suppose, thinking and seeing the world that you think you're looking at reality, but actually it's seen through so many veils and apparatuses that and in those works, I'm trying to make the thought more present than any notion of the actuality. So I said it very succinctly, and you were pleased with that. And now I've said it in a very long-winded sort of way.
No, it's great. Thank you very much.
Are there any other comments or questions? I don't know if I can see everybody's face, so if you have, just start speaking. No? Okay, we've got just a comment in the chat, and it's from Marie-Therese Ross, who said, sorry, I must leave, but I've really enjoyed listening to you, Andrew, and seeing your work. All the best, Marie-Therese. And yeah, and on that note, I think if we don't have any more questions, I'd just like to take this opportunity to say thank you so much, Andrew, for sharing with us, you know, your thoughts and insights into your work so generously. And I think it's been really fascinating. And I'm so glad that you showed us work that you made, you know, for over 40 years ago to work that you're actually making now in the studio. And I think it's really exciting seeing your work and actually, you know, hearing you explaining your working processes and how you engage with materials and how you engage with the world through making sculpture, and that it's so, you know, it's so integral to your being, and it's been absolutely wonderful. So thank you so much. And I don't know if I'm going to hand over to Jonathan now, but people that haven't seen the exhibition yet, there's still plenty of time. The exhibition continues until May the 11th. So do come down to Elysium and actually experience Andrew and the other sculptors' work in that space. And it's really, you know, I know I'm biased, but it's amazing to see that space hold such ambitious sculpture, and it works so well. It's such a brilliant show. So please come and visit, and do come to the other talks as well.